So the case against Trump has been delayed. New York Judge Juan Merchan has decided to delay his ruling on whether to toss President-elect Trump's felony fraud case. And Merchan originally gave himself until today, 1 week after Election Day, to decide whether the 34-count indictment should stand, but ultimately elected to postpone that for a week until next Tuesday. So Merchan can decide how Trump's election will or win, rather, should or should not impact the criminal case. And I want to add this because we got a statement in by a spokesperson for the president-elect just in the last 30 minutes about that was actually a request from Trump's camp. We'll get into more of that, but I put all that off the top. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner here with my co-hosts, Emily Compagno and Kayleigh McEnany. Also joining us today, Kayleigh McGee-White, Journalism Fellow for the Steamboat Institute and Senior Fellow for the Independent Women's Forum. And Steve Hilton, Fox News contributor. Great to see you all. Trump's spokesperson, again, has reacted to the judge's postponement in a statement, and here it is. The American people have re-elected President Trump with an overwhelming mandate to make America great again. It is now abundantly clear that Americans want an immediate end to the weaponization of our justice system, including this case, which should never have been filed, so we can, as President Trump said in his historic victory speech, unify our country and work together for the betterment of our nation. Fox's contributor and law professor at George Washington University, John Turley. Jonathan, we were talking last hour, and now a little bit more time has passed. Any fresh thoughts on November 19th and what we could see?
Well, the Trump administration, I think, can take some solace that they'll have a chance now to argue that the case should be dismissed. But I don't think expectations can be particularly high given this judge's track record. He has not shown any great balance at the trial. I was surprised in watching the trial to see some of his rulings, which frankly didn't make a lot of sense to me. I thought that he had left layers of reversible error, but none of that can be reviewed until this is finalized. Now, some have suggested that the judge could just freeze this for the upcoming term, to leave it in pendency. I just don't see that type of suspension as a likely or good option. You would have the president's critics saying that he's awaiting sentencing after a jury found him guilty of felonies. They need to have a status that where they can appeal this case, including the decisions made by this judge. Now, it is possible in a week that he could yield to calls for dismissal. You know, many have, including myself, felt that this case should never have been brought, that the judge made an unholy mess of it. In my view, it would be good to send the attractions back to their cages and call this circus over. But I wouldn't necessarily bet the farm on that one.
I love the way you describe it. Attractions back to their cages. Only you have that verbate. It's great. You call this a case that was riddled with reversible error. Talk to me about that.
Well, to this day, there's still a debate. It's becoming something of a parlor game as to what Trump was convicted of. This judge allowed the jury to find him guilty without agreeing on what the underlying acts were that led to those convictions. So you could have literally a 4-4-4 jury all disagreeing on what actually occurred. Nobody would look at that and say that that is a viable criminal justice system, that it's grossly unfair. The judge ruled against the president on a number of issues where I thought the president was correct. But also you have the fact that he allowed in evidence from people working at the White House in the first term. That's clearly evidence that would not be allowed under the court's recent immunity decision.
Interesting.
Now, many of us expect that the Judge Merchan would likely say, well, that's harmless. And yes, it should be inadmissible today, but I think the weight of the evidence is sufficient. If he does that, then he would proceed towards sentencing. Keep in mind, he could sentence. He has great flexibility in sentencing. You know, he could just simply say, I'm not going to impose a jail sentence. I'm not going to limit the president's time. I'll even treat the presidency as a type of community service and call it a day. The president could then appeal the underlying conviction in the trial.
While he's president?
Well, he can appeal as an individual in terms of
yeah,
what
but he would be
occurred in the
president.
prior.
I mean, the American people just voted, Jonathan. They want him to be concerned about the country, which is also what kind of taints whatever the judge would do to string this case along until he's out of his presidency. I mean, and he'll be 83 years old. They didn't do that to Joe Biden when they knew they had evidence of him removing classified documents from a SCIF. I mean, I don't understand. It seems like there are two just different rules for Republicans and Democrats.
Well, that's part of the lingering residue of lawfare. You know, this case was lawfare. It should not have been brought. To this day, we don't know exactly what the president was convicted of, but it's going to take a while to be able to rectify that. This judge is unlikely to reverse his views on the evidence, the case, the underlying theory. That would only come with an appellate review. The president can't get to that review until the judge lets go of the case and actually sentences him. Now, with that comes a political penalty that my friend Andy McCarthy has noted, that he will at that point be formally a convicted person, a felon. But most of the Democrats are already referring to them that way.
Yeah.
Right. So I think finality works to the advantage of the president, and suspension would not.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about those American people who are hungry for the reasons that they gave. High prices, all that. They want the president to focus on them. That's and not have to fight off more lawfare, as you put it. Jonathan, thank you very much. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Harris.
So, Kayleigh, what Andy McCarthy said last hour was that Trump is not technically yet a convicted felon, and you heard Jonathan Turley just saying that. We did see for a minute Kamala Harris's team stop using the verbiage convicted felon. And people may have thought, well, that just makes him more sympathetic to people out there who understand that they've been victims of an uneven legal system. Maybe it was because it wasn't true.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The fact that Kamala Harris and Democrats stopped using the word is no small matter, because the truth is lawfare failed. And we can quantify that. Lawfare failed by 75 million plus votes, and that total is going up by the hour as we continue to count votes. 75 million. President Trump got more votes in raw vote totals than any Republican president ever. That's a fact. So lawfare failed. You guys tried that. This case was unprecedented. The New York Times, no fan of this man. The New York Times, biased New York Times. I want to tell you what they said. A New York Times review and interviews with election law experts strongly suggests New York state prosecutors have never before filed an election law case involving a federal campaign. And they go on. This was unprecedented. This should have been dismissed. Judge Merchan, why didn't you dismiss this days ago? This case should have never been brought. It should have been dismissed on summary judgment after it was brought. This is lawfare 2.0. And Judge Merchan needs to take a hike because the American people spoke. He needs to honor that, and we need to move forward as a country. You know,
Emily, I've heard you say time and time again, and you have such respect and deference to people who sit on the bench. It's hard to look at this, though, and to call what he's done up until now, Judge Merchan, something that we might consider fair. I mean, is that fair?
Absolutely. And I think that's a very gentle, respectful way of putting it, frankly. And I want to just dig into the X's and O's, if I may. You're absolutely correct. This is lawfare, and it's really difficult to sort of convey respect for someone who seems to be wielding still that weaponization of the judicial system and, frankly, the absolute blasphemy of our tax dollars. I digress for a second. So, look, both sides, I just want viewers to understand, both sides submitted a joint application to stay these deadlines, okay, prosecution and the defense, but they did so for different reasons. Now, the defense said, look, our client is the president-elect of the United States, and there is no way that he can govern, meaning this is an unconstitutional impediment to his ability to govern if this case continues, if you continue with this nonsense. But they're doing this based on, again, that unconstitutional impediment to govern argument. Now, the people, on the other hand, that New York State came in and said, we need a minute to regroup to figure out how this impacts our case, how him becoming president impacts our case. So the judge, by the way, granted that deadline, as we know.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.